Welcome back to Through a Glass Darkly Radio. You're listening to us on United Public Radio. The intro music was Mark of the Doomslayer by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Welcome back, everyone. What a wild and crazy week. Well, let me take a look before I get started. Wow, I have a lot of comments tonight. I'm going to go through the comments really quickly, and then we can briefly talk about what happened. I will try to be pretty succinct on that. Let me find out where we are. Oh man. All right, I think we already posted some of these, but yeah, spiritual ascension, what a time to be having an earth experience. We're talking about coffee too. Kusama Gaming. Is it Kusama or Kusama? I'll say Kusama. That sounds more Swedish, but maybe not. New challenge is coming. Okay. Tim Beck, weird scenes in the gold mine. I'm not MK'd. I guess MK Ultra'd. Coffee, yes, please. I have my coffee. You can imagine what brand, but since I'm not getting paid for it on this radio show, I'm not going to mention what it is, but I would happily mention it if I had a contract from that company. Anyway, by the way, I'm only allowed to drink one of those once a week because they make me fat. So, all right. So spiritual ascension, God soldiers are unable to be tampered with. No MK Ultra for us. Okay, I already went through a lot of this. Okay, we're talking about grays. Okay. All right, so Kusama Gaming is saying, I'm more curious why the memories come through now. He's talking about grays. Spiritual Ascension is saying, we are remembering. The veil is thinning dramatically. Earthkeeper is saying it's Sunday, 12 p.m. in Australia. Kusama Gaming is saying, I want to remember the good stuff. Spiritual Ascension, it's all an experience. Logan Clark is just mentioning we're time traveling down under. Hey, Scott, good to see you, my friend. Scott Ian. Terrence Wills is writing, I Googled awesome channels and it brought me here. I know you're lying, but I appreciate that. By the way, I had my first guest who said, I found your channel, that YouTube recommended him my channel. And that was Adam Butler. And I literally just laughed. I'm like, you're the first, brother. You're the first. Oh boy. Mosquito annoying. Yes, serious. Mosquitoes are annoying. Earthkeepers at Logan. Hiya, fellow traveler. Yeah, it was a loco week. John Kurtz. Absolutely. All right, Logan Clark, as I'm in the States. Okay. Spiritual Ascension said, I told you last week, Sean, things are going to start getting wild. They're going to get wilder from here. Spectacle in the Simulacrum. Tim Beck is writing. Woo Riders DG, prayers for Charlie Kirk, his family, the victims at Colorado High School, and all others. Yeah, or the woman who was stabbed needlessly. Ukrainian refugee escapes a war zone only to come back to the United States. It's not the first. I had dinner with a friend who survived the Iraq War, and only to get mugged near the World Trade Center, ruins when I met him in New York. So yeah, the United States, we don't provide enough resources to cops or anything. People are basically at their own mercy. Yeah, Logan Clark, how come every time we have a UAP hearing, they start killing high-profile people? Well, there's other stuff that's coming out too. There's data about a certain treatment that people were forced to have that's coming out. So, best to hide that. But let's talk a little bit about. So there's no kind of dialogue possible with. I'm just going to say this with the kind of the far left. There's just no dialogue possible. Um, so this stuff's going to continue to happen. I just urge people to be cautious, not to be rash, and just avoid large crowds. But there is no dialogue possible, and that was Charlie Kirk's error. That was his mistake. You can't talk to these people. There's no talking to these people. Um, just avoid them, and if you can't avoid them, well, but there's just no dialogue is possible. And he was about the most innocuous human being uh, to take out. So I think, and I don't even know if this was. I don't even want to place this on the left because I think this whole thing was orchestrated and meant to divide everybody. It was meant to increase the prospect of depopulation, particularly in Western countries, and I think that's the point, right? I think you have psychological sterilization, you have chemical sterilization, um, which again, a certain medical treatment that, well, I can't talk about this stuff, but um, yeah, there's data that's coming out. I urge you to look at the data and decide for yourself. But if you look at the limits to growth, it was a paper that was written, or a book that was written in 1972 by the Club of Rome. It talks about the planet's carrying capacity and steps that need to be made. Those, if you think about 9/11, if you think about all the things that all the wars that we're seeing every 80 years, where it's a seculum. In that book Generations, we talked about we're in the fourth turning. The last time 80 years ago was the end of World War II, where tens of millions of people died. 80 years before that, the seculum before that was 1865. That was the end of the American Civil War. But also during that period, there were multiple conflicts that were going on, including in Europe, in Mexico, when Napoleon III invaded Mexico, basically killing hundreds of thousands of people. Hundreds of thousands of people died in kind of the German Civil War, basically German unification wars, and a number of other wars in Europe. The Taiping Rebellion from 1850 to 1864, millions of people died. The Russians displaced the Circassians, murdered or displaced 1 to 1.5 million people. So in the 1860s, tens of millions of people also died. So this is a culling, and that's what the elites are doing, and they're ushering in a new world order. These things happen in cycles every 80 years, and this whole Charlie Kirk thing was meant to divide. It was meant to increase the carnage. So just avoid crazy people, avoid large crowds, and you should be okay. Don't allow your emotions to stir you up. And one thing, I'm not going to say too much about it, but if crazy leftists hadn't caused me to lose my job about 4 years ago, for using military language and offending females, is effectively why I lost it. Okay, so I hate these people with every fiber of my being, but I'm not reacting because I've hated them for 4 years because they personally targeted me and my family. And I will never, ever, ever forget that. So these people are crazy. They can't be reasoned with. They can't be bargained with. They are not human as far as I'm concerned. So all I'm telling you is avoid them like the plague and just mind your own business and do not be stirred by emotions. Okay. So, and I'll just leave it at that. And I'm not going to get too excited because I've had 4 years to suppress the rage that I feel toward these people. So for me, the whole Charlie Kirk thing was just Yeah, these people are irrational nut jobs, and that's just this is just what they do. This is just what they do. But don't lash out because not everybody on the left is a raving lunatic. It's just the raving lunatics are the ones that design policy and are, in charge on that side. So again, do not let the be the better angel, okay? Let the better angels of your nature drive what you're doing because we're here to learn and we're here to get through this. So anyway, let's see. All right, I've like lost my place. There's a lot of comments. Oh yeah, there's some good comments, but I just got to find out where we are. Okay, here we go. Yeah, Tulsi is definitely learning a lot, John. Yep, Tulsi Gabbard is amazing. Yeah, that's right, Tim. Because that's why this is not necessarily left versus right. This is just an excuse for people to call for a clampdown from the security state. That's what it's about. They want people on the right being like, let's get the government to clamp down and this, like, no, we don't want that. We don't want that. In fact, I have a friend who's a retired Army colonel. He was saying this, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if you really want that. I think that's the point, right? To surrender more liberties to the people who are really behind this. Yeah, spiritual ascension, the majority of them are too far gone. And it's just that it's also, well, again, I'm not going to get into, I don't want to be accused of medical disinformation, which, yeah, I don't want to touch it. But you're right. And it's not because, and it's not necessarily from natural means, right? On a spiritual level, but also on a biochemical level, let's just say. Okay, Kusama. We need to wake up and not fight each other. Better to keep going with our lives. 100%. 100%. Fred writes, it was sobering to find out how many psychopaths are among us. I think a lot of people who aren't political got their eyes opened. Keep in mind, a lot of those people are bots. A lot of those people are being driven by foreign nation states that want us to do a lot of this stuff. So, but I knew that 4 years ago. So it's nothing new to me. Just stay frosty. That's all I can tell people. Yeah, spiritual ascension, order through chaos, or better termed a dominance through chaos. Earthkeeper says absolutely correct. Spider Bite writes, it's the jinn black magic instilled in the Quran. Logan Clark writes, spot on, Sean, it's to divide and distract. Woo Riders DG, unfortunately, this all is planned well in advance. Every move the global cabal makes is calculated. 100%. Not enough people have been culled yet, so they're trying to do everything they can to do that. Spiderbite writes, the texts literally spell them, and it makes them cover up and fight. Kusama Gaming says, it looks to me like they're trying to aim for the... Yeah, well, they're trying to destroy the major Western powers because the major Western powers consume the most resources per capita, right? So that's why you had the events of 2020 to force people to, take actions against their own personal interest. But they're also doing the same thing in Britain. It's just in Britain, the left holds more sway there. So as a result, they're just like it's painful to watch the death of a nation, but that's what's happening in Britain right now. Spiritual Ascension says the satanic agenda is to make Islam the one world religion. It will become illegal to preach the gospel. Yeah, I don't. Good luck with that in the United States. And that's the other thing too. That's why all these mass shootings are happening, because they want people to give up their weapons, right? And that's the first thing that happens before people lose their sovereignty, because they can't defend themselves. So just These bad things are going to happen. It's not the guns, it's the people who are the puppet masters behind the scenes pushing these people and controlling narratives on mainstream media that are encouraging these people to go crazy. Like, we live in an open air asylum right now because we closed all the mental health institutions and are, medicating these people with stuff that causes them to dissociate. At least that's an argument. Okay. I got to be careful about this stuff. Spider Bite Wise. Oh my God. Coffee's so expensive now. Yeah. I hope they fail. Good will always prevail, but I think they plan these things in cycles. Tim Beck says bio-Leninism, useful idiots. In regard to your comment on the targeting of your family, I know, bud. Sirius says, I like how some suddenly change sides. Yeah, because they've been browbeaten into accepting this nonsense. Right? Like, for me, I don't care anymore. Like, they did what they were going to do to me. Like, so, and I hate them for it. And there will be no reconciliation as far as I'm concerned. But that doesn't mean, it just means I just avoid them. I want to have nothing to do with them. They're just trouble. So you just don't associate with them and you'll be fine. Interesting. Scott Ian saying pineal gland's gone. So out of all the people we see killed, I think Charlie's assassination was so disturbing because it wasn't just a death. We witnessed a clear act of evil, and that is why his death was awful. But that's the point. That's the point of why it was supposed to be awful, to enrage people. Well, yeah, Gray Owl, we are all going to die. Yep, Jalal. Today, millions turned out in Britain, Ireland, Australia. No, no violence. I didn't see Ireland or Australia, but a bunch of friends were sending me images of the turnout. Good evening, Gray Owl. Okay, so Woo Riders DG News just broke that when Israel's leader visited Trump, Israeli agents planted electronic devices on Trump's Secret Service vehicles. Secret Service found the devices. Is this true? Not sure, but news broke. I mean, look, it's the Mossad, right? So yeah, probably. I'd say probably. On the SM crackdown. So John Kurtzreich, Australia just followed Britain on the SM crackdown. What's SM crackdown mean? I don't know what SM means. Tim Beck, well then let's have fun and shake up a bit. Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to comment on religions. I just want to, because I don't. Islam and say like Wahhabist Islam in Saudi Arabia is very different from Sufi Islam and wherever they practice Sufi Islam. So they're different flavors, and I don't want to comment on an entire religion. Good to see you, Grea. Tim Beck writes to Jalea, how organic, holistic was it? I like it superficially, but too orchestrated for my intuition. Yeah, it was very orchestrated. Problem with England is run by lizards, spider bite. Okay. Oh, social media. Wait, so what are they doing with social media in England? Oh, they're just cracking down on it? Oh yeah, just follow Britain on the social media. Yeah, it's just yeah. I'm not saying that word. I'm just gonna scroll right by it. Okay. So there's a video on the Future Forecasting Group by Dick Algeier where he goes through who runs the world. Okay. So just think of it as the International Bank of Settlements administers the world through a series of trusts, and the trusts own LLCs or corporations. Those corporations are what we call nation states. So Trump is basically the CEO of a LLC owned by a trust. The trusts are administered by the International Bank of Settlements. The trusts are controlled by the nobility. Okay, this is what Dick Algeyer's remote viewed or been told. Okay, I'm not endorsing this. There's no way for me to corroborate it. I'm just passing this along. And then according to this worldview, if you watch the future forecasting video from Dick Algeyer, the nobility basically reports into the Vatican. The Vatican reports up to whatever created us. And I'm not talking God. I'm talking like another species that we may look like, but we do not possess remotely the same capabilities. And that species has been here longer than us and also has an off-world presence. So I don't know if that's true or real. I just know it explains everything, right? Where you have a kind of a garden, and sometimes you have to weed the garden, and that's what's happening right now. The carrying capacity of the planet. So they argue in this limits to growth document they wrote in 1972, the Club of Rome, that the carrying capacity of the planet could be overwhelmed. There'll be less food for everybody. So these people who are in control are orchestrating a lot of this stuff. And in order for them to kind of reshape the world, reshape the financial system, which is also coming, which involves cryptocurrency, blockchain. Blockchain is called a chain for a reason. You're gonna see this stuff, and 60% of the population of the Western world was forced or willingly walked right into, biological changes. So what you're seeing in kind of Lynn Buchanan's remote viewing, Stephen Schwartz's remote viewing, the die may have already been cast. So it is what it is. I don't think there's much people can do right now except just use discernment when hearing things from an official capacity. Just assume what you're told is ask yourself what is the motivation of the institution telling you to do something, and ask what they have to gain. And also look at through the framing lens that the elite think that there are too many people. And how would you manage the herd? What steps would you take? Particularly when AI is already on the verge of replacing most entry-level jobs, will probably replace most white-collar jobs in the next 2 to 5 years. AI combined with automated machines or automated robots will replace most blue-collar jobs in about 5 to 10 years. So what are all those humans going to do? So that's the context right now. So you can only expect more uncertainty, more social unrest as the jobs start diminishing and disappearing. So I hope it doesn't happen that way. I hope people are thinking through this problem. Like, I am not a universal basic income guy. I think normally I'd say it's a terrible idea, but now I think you have to explore things like that to, account for people just not having jobs anymore. Right? We can either thrive or die. And if you just look at everything that's happening, it's pretty creepy stuff. Fertility is declining through either choice, psychological sterilization, as I mentioned earlier, or just other sterilization programs. And you can figure out what vector that may have taken. But I'm not gonna suggest any hypotheses because it's too